hello, CPNantes
Hello.
on YouTube, and look what I have on my living room. Dover, club kid, drag queen, DJ, writer, artist, book, movie. Did I forget something?
Hooker. Junkie.
Well, I didn't want to mention that part. Everybody's very Christian here, house. No, it's not. But um, anyways, it's a dream come true. Obviously growing up and watching the club kids, super notorious '90s. You know, so many people, many talents. Eileen Dover, D-Light, RuPaul. I could mention Lady Bunny, but I think she was from the 1900s. I'm not quite. It's too good.
she's well, she's Miss Bunny is ageless.
Ageless, yes. I
Yeah.
love I love her. I follow her on her social media, and it's like, oh my God. You know, anyways, there's certain things that she says that I would like to repeat here, but my legal department is just $50 budget, so I can't pay for
I
all the
mean,
suits.
yeah, it's she has her own way of saying things and I love her to death. She's very
Absolutely.
smart, but she definitely goes her own way.
Yeah. So Eileen Dover, we spoke on the phone, and I told you that this would be my first content in English. Which a friend of mine that he has a podcast, it's like a comedy podcast. You know what I mean? And he was like, you really should do something in English. And I was like, I really would like a cool person, that I feel comfortable. If I never met that person, you know, uh, and then I'm scrolling. I was like, wait a minute, look who's here, Eileen Dover. I really would like to talk to her. So I sent you the message and I was like, it's never going to happen. You know what I mean? And then you answered and I was like super excited.
Oh, I'll always answer. Yeah.
Well, thank you. First of all, you look amazing.
Oh,
Okay.
thank you.
I mean, it's
A
like,
aging club child.
hey, dude, there was that. Okay, yes, we are. So there's like little comments
I can
that,
tell that that person has had college, that
yeah.
they see that we're gay,
Yeah.
like.
Oh my God. You just discover America. You just thought by, you are a psychiatrist. Well, let me do this for you, honey. Okay. We are gonna remove you. There you go. So,
They're having some cognitive dissonance, I
yeah,
feel.
yeah, yeah, you do. You can make a lot of money on us. So, anyways, there's always comments like that that's gonna show up. That's the problem with live on YouTube. But, obviously, you are, this super super artist, okay. You DJ, you drag, you write, and then there's the other side of the activism that I was reading about. Why not fight against bullying and all of that stuff. So I'm gonna start from the beginning. Let's talk about Boston and all of that stuff.
Okay.
If you don't mind.
Not at all. I'll answer the question of why
Hi, David.
TF are we gay? Because we're fabulous.
Fabulous. Well, just to add to Eileen's answer, I am gay because I can. Because I was born to be free and to be whoever I want to be. You know what I mean? So,
Exactly.
unfortunately, you have to be in a closet and come here and talk smack. But, anyways, let's go back to the important part and let's talk about, growing up in Boston. As you know, when I first moved to the United States, um, I moved to Boston, and that the only thing that I thought it was weird in Boston when I started going out in Boston was that everything closed at 2 a.m., 2:30 a.m.
Yeah, now from what I understand, it's even earlier.
Yes.
So Yeah, I guess it's a more conservative town. It's more like of a
Mhm.
college town. People go to bed
Mhm.
and they have to wake up and do their homework and all that stuff.
Mhm.
And it's a very, educational
Mhm.
town. It's a
Right.
beautiful city and it's got a
Beautiful,
lot
yeah.
of wonderful people in it.
Yeah.
But I just needed more art. I needed more artistic, you know. I had a history in Boston where, like in Catholic school, I was abused by the teachers, I was
Brazil.
abused by the
Mhm.
kids and all
Mhm.
that stuff. So it was
Mhm.
just sort of like I think it was a natural place for me to migrate to New York because it was really close, but it was also, the place that everybody went to,
Right.
everybody who didn't fit in.
Right. It's so funny. I can relate to that. It's so because you never imagine that. Wait, there's somebody here asking you to say hi, hello to Brazil. So if you want to respond to that.
Obrigado, Brazil.
Ah,
Hello, Brazil.
very beautiful. Thank you, Patrick Wonderful.
I
Thank
love you,
you.
Brazil. Brazil is such warm and amazing people, and I love Brazil. I
It's
absolutely
fun.
love you guys.
It's fun. Um, Pennywise called. He was yes, we will. So it's so funny that you say that about Boston because when you move from outside of the country to the United States, you don't actually think that such a thing ever could happen, because it's such like this idea of freedom and all of that stuff. I can
Right.
relate to that, like moving. Obviously, Boston is not a small town, but it does have, it's a big city, but it sometimes have a little bit of a small town vibe. So I kind of get
Yeah.
that you wanted to move to New York. Christy, thank you. And so you moved to New York, right? But you were already going around, the Boston club scene. Uh, you know.
Well, so here's my trajectory. I sort of was in high school and I was sneaking out to a lot of the Boston clubs to sort of
Mhm.
find my way. I was like sneaking in with fake IDs, and a lot of times when you put like lots of makeup on, you could
Right.
use anybody's IDs. So
Mhm.
that, like,
Right.
it helped that I had that flair.
Mhm.
um, and then after I graduated high school, I was just like, I really want to go to New York. So I
Mhm.
lived part time in Boston and part time in New York, and I was back
Got
and
it.
forth so frequently. And I would bring my ideas from New York back to Boston, and there were other people doing that too,
Mhm.
because it's such a close proximity.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but
Right.
New York was always, the goal, but I
Mhm.
kept doing it half-assed. Like I kept
Mhm.
doing it like where I would come and I would stay for 4 days, and then I would go back to Boston, and I would do 3 or 4 gigs there, and then I would
Mhm.
come back to New York and do a couple of gigs here, and then after a while,
Mhm.
I got tired of it, and I ended up in a 5-year relationship, and that, totally,
Mhm.
turned my life into sort of a conservative, like not conservative, but like non-clubby, non
Mhm. Right.
out there. I wasn't dressing up. I wasn't,
Mhm.
crazy or wild or out there. I was more interested in my relationship and my dog and my condo and my
Right.
9 to 5 job and all of that, and living the normal life. And I was very happy,
Right.
but that itch was still there.
Right.
So I started going to New York again. And
I get it.
needless to say, that relationship after 5 years broke up.
Mhm.
And I started to go to New York again and to reconnect with, and this was in my 30s, luckily. And then at age 39, I was like, you know what? I'm tired of going back and forth. I'm tired of, living and sleeping on buses. I'm
Mhm.
just going to go there and live there forever and like not come back to Boston.
Right. So, a couple of things like that. I'm here, listening to you, and you mentioned the word dressed up twice. So growing up, um, I guess having all of that, the whole new romantic scene coming from London, UK. Uh, obviously, the club kids happened, way after that. I think I'm older than you in the sense that dressing up for me was very important. Um, it, it gave me that feeling that I was setting myself different, and I love that. I love that the fact that I was a little bit so. For me, it was almost like a political statement, to absolutely. So how was like it was growing up, like how was like dressing up for you? Like, I would look, I don't know, I would look at Boy George, Marilyn, Bowie, Pete Burns, you know what I mean? And I don't think I ever went to that extent, but like, Duran Duran spent that, makeup and so how was that important for you dressing up?
Well, I'll tell you a story, and this sums up sort of my dressing up in the 90s experience. I worked at a nightclub in Boston called Avalon,
Yeah,
and
Avalon.
I worked the door, and every night the Fenway Park was right across the street from Avalon.
Yeah.
So in the summertime, there would be hordes of Fenway Park, Red Sox fans,
Yes.
super testosterone,
Yeah.
butch, guys that, pouring out of that stadium. And they would say, Eileen, Eileen, you need to come inside. You're going to get hurt. And I said, no. I said, no, absolutely not. I will not be chased inside by these
Yeah.
people. And
Yeah.
it was that it was for me, it was like I won't be chased inside. I won't be intimidated anymore. I won't be, you
Mhm.
know. But what I look back and realize is that the visibility was
Mhm.
really important
Absolutely.
because the few people that did stop and talk and get to know me a little bit, they realize that I'm just the same as them. I'm just
Mhm.
like, doing making a living, doing my thing, like I'm a little over the top, but like,
Mhm.
whatever, like, and I am really glad that I had the foresight to refuse to be
Mhm.
silenced or you know to refuse to be stuffed in the closet while
Right.
the Red Sox game let out, because I think that helped for some of those people. I think it helped normalize. Thank you so much, Marianne. I think it helped to normalize, people who are different for some of those people,
Mhm.
and they maybe had never seen somebody like me before, or they had maybe never seen anybody who was different before, and that was their opportunity. And I didn't want that to
Mhm.
go. That opportunity to go
Notice, yeah.
un, unused. Yeah, I
Yeah.
wanted to make
Yeah.
sure that people understood that, like, yeah, hey, we do exist, and you know what? We're not bad people.
Right.
We're
Absolutely
just
not. Absolutely. It's so funny. I ask you the whole thing about dress. I mean, I think that looking in a certain way, for me, it was very important. Um, and it brings me to once we're talking about this, in like our social political place. Do you feel that in the beginning at least I'm not ashamed to say, for a long time, I think that I lived a double life. You know what I mean? Like you would, and I gotta tell you, my parents, they had many, 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 many fights with me. You know what I mean? Like about work about like a bad grade in school or being lazy, but they never ever. I was very lucky in the sense that my parents were never homophobic. They never, I don't even think my parents ever asked me or my sister about our sexuality. However, with friends, I feel that for a while there, I had to leave like, a double, like kind of, your own thing here with your friends. And then you're really who you are when you go to the club. And, did you go through that or,
Well, I came out when I was about 12 or 13. I
Mhm,
was really young. And my parents were like, oh, you're a contrarian. You'll say anything to get our goat, like, because I was a pretty rambunctious child. I
mhm.
did stir the pot all the time. I was always the one who, if they said red, I would say blue. If they said blue,
Yeah.
I would say red,
Mhm,
so I
mhm,
can understand why they thought the way
mhm.
that they did.
Yeah.
And it just was a matter of it wasn't going away. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like it was not going away. And my parents, my mother eventually bought me a book about HIV AIDS, how to
Mhm.
protect yourself. And you should say it's so outdated now, the information.
Yeah.
But at the time it was what they knew.
Mhm. Right.
And I think that that did keep me safe. It kept me from acquiring the
Mhm.
disease.
Yeah.
Um, and I went to a Catholic school, and we had to do 20 hours a year of community service
Mhm.
in the Catholic school. And it was an all boys Catholic school,
Okay.
very religious,
Mhm.
and I said, I want to do mine at the AIDS Action Committee of
Mhm.
Massachusetts. And they said, nope. And they sent the slip home to my mother. They said, we're not going to approve that.
Mhm.
And my mother wrote a scathing letter. She wrote a letter and she said, you will let my child, volunteer there. You
Mhm.
will, and years later, I asked her, like, why did you do that? And she said,
Mhm.
because those people at the AIDS Action Committee had answers on how to keep you safe. And she said
Mhm.
that I didn't have the answers.
Mhm.
I wanted to make sure you were around people who
Mhm.
knew how to keep you safe. And
Yeah.
she said, and I didn't have the answers. And she said, honestly, every fight that we got into about my sexuality or my gender or anything like that. I asked her about all those things too, and she said the root of all of that was not that they were afraid. Thank you, Patrick. Yes, she absolutely is iconic, and she still is to this day, and I love her so much. But yeah, she, to this day, we're very, very, very close friends,
Mhm.
and I asked her again, like one of the things, like, why did you, do some,
Mhm.
why were you angry when I came out? And she said, I wasn't angry at you. She said, I wasn't angry at all. You were not the problem. She
Mhm.
said, I was angry at the world,
Right.
that the world was going to treat you
Uh-huh.
less
Yeah.
than, and I
Mhm.
wanted you to have all the opportunities that anybody else could have, and I just saw it as an uphill battle, and she's like, I wanted to fight it for you, I wanted to do it,
Right.
like, but she's like, she couldn't, you know obviously you can't fight your kids battles, like.
Right. Right. And it's so, I mean, even like living in different countries, I guess, we go through the same thing. I think in Brazil, it was the campaigns, anti-AIDS, anti-HIV, to prevent, for you to, that whole campaign was a little more aggressive. I remember driving to work. I didn't even remember that. And I saw, it was like huge on this billboard. Okay, and it was like, if you catch AIDS, you're gonna die.
Basically, yeah, that's
Yeah,
what
and
they.
there was a commercial on TV that there were I think like a group of people, and then like, there was like, I'm diabetic, I can help I have cancer, I can treat myself, or this, and then I remember to this day it was this guy, okay, and he say, I got AIDS, I'm gonna die. You know, so it was kind of like really aggressive. Actually, I got to mention an interesting fact that by the end of the 90s, okay, in Brazil, and you can Google this. This is a true fact. The incidence of contamination for HIV/AIDS between the gay community went down like crazy. Okay, but it went up between the straight community. So so for us it was like it was very scary. I remember, I started, my sexual life, my in the middle of all of that, you know what I mean. So it was very scary. I lost many friends, there was a time that I remember that there was a week I had 7 funerals in one week. So it was a very dark period, you
Yeah,
know.
and that was like we all had that. Like I used to remember, like when I first started doing drag or first started doing looks, I would do shows, and they were almost exclusively benefit shows.
Mhm.
And to answer Patrick's question, I did. I was allowed by the school
Mhm.
after my mother's note to do the work at the AIDS Action Committee, and I did learn a lot from those people at the AIDS Action Committee. And it was a really eye-opening experience because the thing is I thought, like, when I came out and went, like, I thought that kicking the closet door was going to be the hardest
Yeah,
kick
so,
that I
so
was
true.
gonna, like the
Yeah,
hardest
I was
punch I was
ready.
gonna throw.
Yeah.
It was nothing compared to what I was about to face, with people dying and with people getting sick.
Yeah.
And it was also nothing that I compared to what I was going to face with, you know,
Mhm.
gay people like that. Just they loved me like as a piece of furniture, as like a
Mhm.
as an entertainment piece. They
Mhm.
deified the drag or the entertainment piece of me, but they wanted nothing to do with me
Mhm. Oh,
as
then,
far as
yeah.
dating.
Well, then there's that. There's that whole. It's so funny because we fight the stigma every day. At least, on my days, I could see some kind of, I don't know, transphobia or, it's sad to say this, but back in the day in Brazil, there were clubs where, if you were trans, they would charge you more, or they would say, no, you can't get in here.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So within their own community, there's like some I don't know, some educational, that we should really sit down and talk about it. But so moving on from that phase, you obviously moved to New York, right? And got your gigs, and then uh the club kid scene happened, which for us in Brazil, it was like, I mean, obviously, especially that generation from my age, with Boy George, Marilyn, Pete Barnes, and all of the Blitz kids, you know what I mean. There's a question from Patrick here before we move on from that subject. Do you think there's a large amount of discrimination within the community, not just from outside?
I have to say there's more discrimination from inside the community than there is on the outside.
I have to agree.
Yeah.
I have to agree.
There's more racism, there's more transphobia, there's more I guess you would call it drag phobia. There's, inside the, I would say amongst
Mm-hmm.
straight acting, straight appearing gay
Mm-hmm.
white men, there is a huge, huge, huge disparity. There's a huge amount of discrimination
Yeah.
inside the community.
Yeah.
That I didn't I got bookings at straight clubs. They loved us. They
Right.
loved us. They thought that we were, a hoot. And they, some of the straight boys, their butter was breaded on both
Yeah.
sides.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Their
Yeah. I
bread
live
was
in the
buttered on
South,
both
so
sides. So they, they enjoyed all of this,
right.
like, but yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely 100%. That's a great
Yeah.
question. And it's
I agree with
unfortunately,
that. I appreciate Patrick's question. And before we move on from that subject, I just, just to agree with Aileen, I have to say, I mean, we can't deny the existence of that no black, no fat, no Asian. You know what I mean? Like,
no fats, no femmes, no,
exact no
yeah.
femmes, and it's so funny because I just had a live sit down with Chelsea. She is a trans woman from Brazil. She sings like an angel, and but anyways, we were having this discussion, and there's always that joke about the femme, the gay that's more feminine, or uh, um, you know, and I never liked that. I never thought that was funny. I never thought that was cute. And honestly, if I had a kid, I don't care if it was a butcher lesbian or a gay boy that's more feminine, and people were making fun. I would not, I would do something about it to defend my kid. You know what I
Right.
mean? Because my problem with that, it starts with a joke. You know what I mean? It always ends in a terrible way. You know what I mean? So I never liked that joke very much. I never, but anyways, just to agree with what you say on Patrick's question, yeah, unfortunately, within our community, I see more racism. I see more transphobia. I see more, drag phobia. And there's always that joke about that gay guy that's more feminine, you know. It's so funny that we're talking about this. Because things, I'm talking to you and things, come back to, I remember back in the day, a teacher asked me, you know, we really need to talk to your parents because you're a little feminine. You know what I mean? And my answer, you can call my parents here anytime you want because I think that I'm not sure if I'm feminine or not, but I think that I am exactly the balance between my father and my mom. I say, I was born from a female, so it's natural for me that I have some, you know, femme behavior.
Right.
I wasn't born from a man. You know what I mean? Like my father is my father, but my mom is like. So I think there's a great balance between masculinity and femininity. So I remember that, and my parents loved the answer. And my parents went to the school, and they kind of like trashed that teacher. But anyways, to obviously before we move on to the New York subject, I think yeah, unfortunately, we have a lot of work to do within our community as far as
Yeah.
so
It's just it's really sad and really hard
yeah.
to walk into a space that is supposed to be our space,
Hmm.
and to be like unwelcomed, or
Yeah.
like, you get the vibe that you're unwelcomed,
Right,
you
yeah,
know. And then
absolutely.
we do it to each other too. Like,
Yeah.
trans women do it to each other. They're like competitive and catty and this, that, and the other. And, they do it to each other. And, this one's doing this and that one's doing
Yeah.
that. They do it. It's just endless. It's
It's
endless. And
endless because and I hear you say that, but doesn't cis women they do that to each other too, or cis men? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
well,
So I guess
hurt people hurt people.
yeah, people hurt
So
people regardless of your sexuality or gender. So I guess in the end of the day, at the end of the day, okay, I think that we really should be more kind to each other. I think
yeah, we
these things.
can't glaze over over the whole issue. We have to acknowledge it.
Right, right. But thank you, Patrick. Vlad, thank you, Vlad, for being here. Vlad is from Brazil. He knows who you are, and a super, super mega friend from São Paulo. He was actually a club
Oh,
kid too in São Paulo. That's a subject for later. You had the limelight. We had the Hell's Club. You know what I mean?
yeah.
You had Come de Garçon. We had Hershkovich. So it was kind of like that. So you moved to New York, okay, and you're free. And how did that, like, you step in New York and what happened?
So I'm in my late teens, early 20s, and I'm living in an apartment in the South End of Boston. And I would leave and go to New York and not come back for a week. And then I would just like couch surf in New York, and then I would go back, and then I'd do a couple of gigs in Boston, then go back to New York. Like it was really insane. Only something you could do if you were in your 20s, because nobody,
Oh, I know. Yeah. Yeah.
nobody would have the energy to do it now.
No.
You know what I mean? Like I certainly wouldn't.
Yeah.
But it was doable back then, and we were just so fascinated. There was so much actually back then in Boston. But
True.
at the same time, it was like, all right, well, we can go and get this, like where it's like maybe one or two clubs in Boston. We can go to New York where it's like 30 or 40 clubs,
Right. Right.
or like, and then after hours, and then after hours, we could go out Friday
After
night.
parties. Yes. Yeah. And I mean, obviously you were there, right? But from us, we were watching from the outside. I remember, so MTV came to Brazil only in the 90s. You know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
remember an episode about the club kids, you know what I mean? And obviously, we had gone through disco, we had gone through, New Romantic and Boy George and Pete Burns and Marilyn and Bowie and all of that stuff. But, when you guys came on TV, okay, because here's the difference, okay, and I could be wrong, okay? I think that some of those very talented people, mega stars for a million souls from the New Romantic Club Kids Club. They took themselves too serious. Some of them, you know.
Some
I
of
think
them
Boy
did,
George.
and some
I
of
think
them didn't take themselves
yeah. I
serious
think Boy
enough.
George, Marilyn. They always had an amazing sense of humor. You know what I mean? But some of the so fast forward to the club kids, right? So then, we go through that period that, that horrible grunge, you know what I mean? And then all of a sudden, you see the club kids on TV, and it was like absolutely fun, hilarious. It was, a bunch of people like having fun, like, um, so can you talk about that a little bit? Like, you know what I mean? Like the fun part of it.
Well, so I grew up with the New Romantic and Boy
Mm.
George and all that. And Boy George was somebody who I looked up to because he
Oh
looked on
yeah.
the outside how I felt on the inside. So I actually met George in 2000, and we've been best of friends ever
I
since.
love Boy
So
George, yes.
yeah, I call him Gina. I love Gina. Gina's my girlfriend,
Yeah.
but but yeah, he's been a great friend. He's always been so kind and so generous and so like, such a great person, but he also excuse me. Oh my god, I'm so
Am I
sorry.
boring you?
No, it's but he knows the anatomy of a look. So
Oh
like he'll
yeah.
look at like what you're doing and he'll be like, "Oh girl, no," or "Oh girl," you know what I mean? So like I had a really, a great person to bounce my ideas off of. But yeah, moving to New York and being in with the club kids, I never did the talk shows with them. I was
Mhm.
always sort of hanging out on the sidelines. I was
Mhm.
always like with Angel Melendez, I was always hiding behind, like I would tuck myself behind his wings, or I would, I would like find ways to like hide because
Mm.
for me, these were like the big time, like,
Mhm.
people, like now that just I look at them, they're all just people. They're all just like whatever.
At
They're
that
just
time, at that time, you felt intimidated.
I did, and some
Mhm.
people made me feel welcomed. Like
Mhm.
Richie Rich made me feel welcomed,
Yeah.
and Trevor Raines, who I had the biggest crush on, he made me feel welcomed,
Yeah.
and Angel made me feel very welcomed.
Angel.
And those are the people like who made me feel welcomed, and they gave me room to explore my
Hmm.
looks and my
Right.
my makeup abilities and my costuming abilities. And excuse me, I don't know what it is in the air, but like see, you get old and you start to get tired when the sun goes down.
Well, it's the same thing here.
But
Uh,
but yeah, like they just sort of like, I saw them on TV and then to see them in real life. And honestly, like with a lot of them, I won't mention any names, but
mhm.
the name of the game wasn't how much fun you could have. It's like how effed up could you get?
Right.
Like how sloppy could you get?
Right.
Like and still
So
make
how
it
fun,
home.
I mean, for us, it was funny. It was it was like, I was like, who are these people? Like, what are they? They're not trans. They're not girls. They're not like. I was like so intrigued that I was like, can I do that? Can we do that? And all of a sudden you go into the clubs, right? And in Brazil, and you go like, obviously, dance music and house music was happening, like especially from Europe, like Italian house music, and you go from Black Box, okay, to Junior Vasquez, like that. Everything switched, and it wasn't about the most beautiful look. It was
Right.
just like the club kids. It was about the most outrageous, funny. There was a sense of humor
There
about
was,
how,
and it was very tongue in cheek. And sometimes
yeah.
that sense of humor. Oh, and by the way, Patrick Cronin, thank you so much for saying I need to write a book. It is in progress. It has been in progress for like 5 or 6 years. And I promise I will write it. I will get it out. I promise. I promise. I promise.
I want the hype.
Um,
Yeah.
it's yeah.
Yeah.
It's on the way. If I don't die, it's on the way. So don't worry. And
Yeah. You're
I've
not
been
gonna
through
die.
I've
I'll
been
be
through
the
all this, so I'm not gonna die. But
I'll be the translator to the Portuguese version, to Brazil.
yes, absolutely.
So
Yeah.
going back
Um
to that, I think that, and don't get me wrong, like I get Boy George. I always loved Boy. I think that, he always had a sense of humor about everything. Marilyn had a sense of Pete Burns had a sense. You know, some of them, Steve Strange or Duran Duran, which I love Duran Duran, they were very serious about it or whatever. So I think, the way I see it, it was like a bridge, from that outrageous thing. You know what I mean? Oh my God! It wasn't about being super skinny anymore. It wasn't about being, I don't know, Kate Moss on a runway. It was about, an, let's see who get more outrageous. Okay, who gets more, creativity in a sense that, okay, so here there's fashion and we're gonna band it and we're gonna wear it and people are gonna buy it.
Well, the promoter whose name I won't mention,
Thank you.
that person was a big fan of Herschel Gordon Lewis, and Herschel
Mhm.
Gordon Lewis was known as the gore. He was like a gore person, like in the horror films. His films were really loosely scripted. There wasn't really much to the scripts, but it was just very gory. So that person put on, like, one of his movies was called Blood Feast. So he put on like a blood feast party. And it
Mhm.
was like, people like wearing like a slip dress, just something simple, but they would have blood and guts coming out of their stomach or
Right.
whatever, like in a cage or whatever.
Mhm.
So that was outrageous. That was
Mhm.
like the most outrageous that you could do. But everybody wanted to outdo everybody else.
Yeah.
And there was like I can't remember the queen's name. I don't know. I want to say Aquaria, but I know Aquaria is new from
The new
RuPaul's Drag
aquarium,
Race.
yes.
But there's an older club kid that had fish tanks in her platforms,
Oh,
and
sorry. I'm not gonna remember. Yeah, I know what you're
I
talking about.
don't remember who it was, but I think the fish were all dead,
Isn't
but
that a
like,
problem though?
yeah.
Let's pause here. Isn't that an issue? Because like we can remember Angel, we can remember Eileen Dover, we can remember, RuPaul and Delight. And isn't that a problem that we cannot remember of the super drag of last month? I'm just saying.
Well, the thing about are you talking about current drag queens, like
Yeah, yeah,
new?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. The reason why we can't remember them is because there are so many. Like back in the day, there were a handful of us in Boston, a handful of us in New York, a handful of us in Chicago, a
Right.
handful of us in LA.
Yeah.
Nobody wanted to be a drag queen because it meant sticking out. It meant that you would sacrifice your dating life
True.
because you were being, I mean, not your sex life, because there were guys that fetishized that, but your dating
Just
life.
like what's there.
Because yeah, but they would, and they would come after you, and you'd have like the greatest sex on earth, and there would be all promises and all love and all giggles and everything else, but they left and went back to their girlfriends,
Right.
like, and it wasn't real. It was not real. And like waking up from all of this, like, like I got sober in 2003, and it's been a bumpy road. And, I don't know where I am right now on the road. Like, I'll drink, whatever, here, there, whatever. But like, I don't take any of those substances anymore. I don't do all of that. And, I can't. I couldn't.
Yeah.
I feel like I'd drop dead.
No, I get
But
it. Yeah, I get it. I can get, honestly, like I work, I work with a lot of young people, and sometimes they have those energetic drinks, and they give it
yeah,
to me, and I'm like, I can't, I'll fall dead, right? It's like me on the floor, like,
I
okay.
know.
Yeah.
Well,
It's
we thought Jolt Cola was like, you know,
the thing. Yeah.
I
Oh my
mean,
God, it's so funny. But I think that back in the day, it wasn't that bad. You know what I mean? Listen, I hate to talk about drugs because, you know, and I had this conversation with someone very close to me. Okay, and I used to say, you know what, I love drugs. They open my mind and they open my heart for like a whole new different world. And I would say that in front of everybody, you know. And then you have people that struggle with it. You know what I mean?
Right.
You know, and I felt like, and that's why I don't like to talk about this because I felt like it was, kind of rude and kind of insensitive and kind of, you know what I mean? Because yes, I had my period, but I had a lot of fun. I didn't have a problem. But then over some like 10 people had a lot of problems with it. You know what I mean? So I kind of like stay to myself on that subject because, it's a different experience for, every other human being. You know what I mean?
Everybody has a different experience.
Yeah.
Like everybody that drinks a beer is not an alcoholic. They pick up a beer and they have one or two and then they're done.
Yeah.
There's not a one size fits all solution to every person.
Right. Right.
And that's the thing that we need to realize, and we need to encourage people who are maybe struggling or who are like shutting out bad stuff from their childhood or their bad emotions from their
Yeah.
from their growing up or and they're
Yeah.
using drugs and alcohol to
Hi, Chelsea. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
So
it's
I tell you, I think behind, I'm gonna be very honest. Like, I love wine. you know, and I drink wine almost every day. And I think that wine makes me feel, I don't know, relax me. I feel like a better person. The next day, I wake up and I go to work and I treat people better and they treat me better and all of that stuff. I don't think it's a problem yet, but, it could become a problem. You never know. You never know. You know what I mean? And when you talk about addiction, there's like several different types of addiction. There's addiction to power, there's addiction to money,
social
there's
media.
there's social media, there's addiction to food, you know what I mean? So when people talk about drugs, you know what I mean? Oh, with this addiction that, I kind of keep it to myself because, not anymore because I'm talking here with you on YouTube, right? And everybody's watching. I always question, okay, so what about cigarettes? What about food? What about sweets? What about chocolate? Like I love chocolate. Like I cannot go a day without eat a little bit of chocolate. Is that an addiction? Is it not? You know what I mean? Like, you know,
I think if we have something in our lives, right?
mhm,
Say any of those things, chocolate, and if we have those things in our lives and we
mhm,
go to the doctors and it's not hurting us physically and it's not hurting anybody emotionally and it's not, hurting your piggy bank and it's not like getting in the way of relationships and it's not, then
mhm,
but I think like we're all on such high alert, like, ooh, everything is an addiction. Like
right,
everything isn't an addiction. You know what I mean?
right,
Everything, it's person by person, case by case, substance by substance, thing by thing.
yeah,
And like I could go into
yeah,
Caesar's Palace with $150 and walk and say, "Oh, I'm going to play one game." And
right,
I
right,
would walk out of there with exactly how much it costs to play one game. I don't know. I'd walk out of there with $140, if
mhm,
the game was $10.
yeah,
It just isn't my thing.
right.
But then some people go in
Some
there and
people
they
love it.
they
They
wager their whole lives,
Yeah.
like,
It's just what I don't like about that is the pointing fingers. You know what I
oh,
mean?
and
Like,
our community is great at doing that
great
because
at
they
doing
don't.
that. It's, especially, I hope I don't get canceled on my first English content. But people that are, on a level of sobriety that, I admire and, people they overcome, so many goals that maybe I couldn't, you know what I mean? So I respect them for that. But some of them that like to point a figure, hey, oh, you did it. Here's the thing though, okay? You don't need to tell me I'm fat. I know I'm fat. Okay, you know what I mean? I know I combed my hair like 1986 Duran Duran. You don't need to tell me that. I like it that way. I like being a big guy. It's not going to change. You know what I mean? Like I'm not hurting anyone. I think,
That's that's the thing.
right.
That's the bottom line. You're not hurting anybody or yourself.
You
It
know,
doesn't. It's none of anybody's damn business,
right.
and like
I would love not to eat carbs. Okay, but I go to work and there's those biscuits that come out of the oven, you know what I mean? And you put butter on it and the butter melts, you know what I mean? How am I not gonna eat that? Like I want it, so you don't need to tell me that might be a kind of addiction. I just, I think there's a
but you do
place.
a pros and cons list with
Right.
everything. Is it bringing you more pleasure or more pain?
Yeah.
And if it's bringing you more pain, then you could work on it, or you could
Yeah.
do something about it. Or if it's bringing you more pleasure, you
Yeah.
can just
Right.
let it go and just keep doing what you're doing. But like, I really think that everybody is hypersensitive about everything
Super,
right
super.
now.
Yeah, yeah,
And
and everybody, for the love of God, Eileen and I, we're not here, saying that addiction is a good thing or what. What we are talking about is
it's an
how we
awful
sit
thing.
down
It's
to
a
talk to these
hard.
people, in a way that's not hurtful. You know what I mean?
Right,
So
right.
there's a way to talk about this that's not hurtful. So that's what we're talking about. There's
Yeah,
not.
if you're finding that, you're using, money that should be going towards bills or
Absolutely.
rent
Then it's a
to
problem. Yeah.
have that extra beer or to have that extra shot or to have that extra line or whatever it is,
Yeah.
then you've got at least the beginning of a problem.
Yeah.
At least it's starting to show as a problem
Right.
because, you're prioritizing a substance or an activity over shelter,
Right.
over,
Right. Yeah. I guess what I'm trying to say here is that there's a way to talk about this without being hurtful. And I'll give you an example. There was a period of my life, okay, that I quit smoking, and I quit drinking, and I started going to the gym, you know, and was in a short, I'm a big guy, so a short period of time I was buff, and I had a chest, and you know what I mean. And and I went for more, and I went for more, and over a sudden I saw I was getting aggressive. I was on traffic, I was like fighting with people on a highway in New Hampshire. You know what I mean? That
your
they were not even
testosterone
listening.
levels was
Right? They were
spiking.
not even listening to me. You know what I mean? So and I saw, and I realized I was like, this is not good. Like I'm fighting with myself inside my car with people that are driving by me. And they don't, they don't even know that I'm here. You know what I mean? Like it's mental. But so, with time, and like I said, I'm 52 years old, so things get, you get a little more. Um, I don't know. I guess you get smarter then, and you start, walking away from this type of shit. But it happens to everybody. It happens in many, many levels. You know what I mean? So I guess that's what I'm trying to say. I think that my generation, your generation, we had fun with it. We moved on, but
Well, we're
unfortunately,
in the same generation, Gen X.
I always think I'm older than you.
No, no, I'll be 50 this next coming year.
um,
So
yeah,
you're
well,
only a couple of years older.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, but anyways, I think that, like I said, there's a way to talk to people about that without being hurtful. So, I would like to, be a little bit of a fan, uh, uh, you know, and I want to ask you about New York and RuPaul and Lady Bunny.
Okay.
You went through a roast. You know what I mean? That was, oh my God, that was fantastic. Can you talk about that a little bit? Like, New York, RuPaul, Lady Bunny, uh, you know, uh,
Which
all that.
roast?
Did you go through? I thought you were involved with comedy for a while.
Yes and no. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I had myself roasted.
Right, right.
I did my so Michael Musto and
Yeah,
Nora
exactly.
Burns, who wrote The
Yes.
Village, yeah, they roasted me at my
Yeah.
show at Pangea.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so they're both amazing. They were hilarious. I was laughing harder than anybody. You
Yeah.
know, like I thought it was great. They held nothing back. They let me have it with all barrels, and
Yeah.
I loved it. I
Let's
loved
have a
it.
kiki. Yeah. So, I mean, just if you could a little bit, like, you're from Boston, you arrive in New York, and all of a sudden you're like around all of these people that are like super creative, and how was it? You know what I mean? How did you?
Well,
How
I
what
would
was the feeling?
I would come here and I would see them and I would like, like log their names in my head. And then I would go back to Boston and I worked in like a club called Quest and I worked at Avalon, I worked at Venus. And the managers there would be like, "Oh, you've been in New York, or who did you see?" And I'd be like, "We have to book this person. We have to book that person." So it became like a little family, like me and Sherry Vine and Lady Bunny and Linda Simpson. We all became like a little family
Mm-hmm.
of queens from the Northeast. Because I went down to New York enough to see them, and they were booked up in Boston
Mm-hmm.
because of me,
Oh, the connection, yeah.
so it was always back and forth. RuPaul, do we need to go there?
I'm a horrible person. Um, I mean, I guess not.
I mean, we can. I mean, I like she released Supermodel and I
It's
was in,
Glamazon.
I was in awe of her. I thought, "Oh my God, one of us has made it," like it was right after I'd just gotten out of high school and she was at a block party in Boston at this club called Chaps that they used to shut off the
Oh my God, yes, I was there. Yep.
yeah, and I me and a friend of mine were meant to be dancing on these like lifts that went way way up in the air and we were go-go dancing and RuPaul was the entertainment
Mm-hmm.
and when I went down, there was no dressing rooms in the club. It was just a really dingy bathroom. And when we went down, there was RuPaul had her, rider or like whatever fruit and all of her stuff. And then I had a modest little chair, and my friend had a modest little chair, and we came in and I sat down and they were like, "Oh, Ru, this is Eileen. She's um performing as
Right.
well." And
Mhm.
she went, "I don't share my dressing room. Could you tell it to leave?"
It's so it's so disappointing, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's so disappointing. Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna, I don't know. I'm not gonna sit here and say that, I guess RuPaul, in a way, broke some barriers, bringing drag to the living room of the traditional family, through TV.
But if
Um,
you ask yourself, is that really a good thing? She took an underground
well,
art form that was for our people
I
and
was gonna,
she
yeah, I
turned
was
it
gonna
into a
get to that. Yeah,
capitalistic
yeah.
pursuit.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't want to be shady, but I guess I'm gonna be shady a little bit. I think that, in a sense, that bringing drag culture and art, um, exactly, Patrick. Meeting your idols is not all that. Although I met Cyndi Lauper and I was in love with her, she was super cool to me.
Oh, I
Uh,
worked I worked for Cyndi Lauper. She was a total pro. She was an amazing. I met
yeah,
Madonna. so sweet. Like everybody talks so badly about her.
Right.
So sweet. Boy, George and I have been friends for
Oh, okay.
25 years. I mean,
I can
it
listen.
is
I can never meet Boy George ever. Okay, because
why
I'm gonna fall flat on the floor. Like I'll die. I'll die, die, die. You know what I mean? Like
he's
that's
just
like
a regular
yeah.
guy.
Well, I mean, I'm a fan. You know what I mean? You're a slut, so
Yeah.
it's. I guess your relationship, is different with him. But going back to that subject, what you say is so interesting, bringing that whole drag culture to the living room of the traditional family to TV to national television. Was that a good thing? Was that a bad thing? I guess in the beginning it was a good thing. It was kind of like, if you see the beginning of the first episodes, it was kind of like about talent. I don't know. I mean, my perception is different, right? I'm not a drag queen. You know what I mean? You are. You know what I mean? So you have that place where you can talk about it. Oi, Joel, tudo bem? You have that place that you can talk about. That's not my place to talk. You know what I mean? So as a fan, but I will say this though, with a little bit of shade, I think that Willem should run that show.
Oh, I
He's
like
yeah,
Willem.
I
I
love
like
him.
Willem a lot.
Love.
Yeah.
Oh my
I
god, I
love
love
Bob the
him.
Drag Queen. I love Monet Exchange. I love Willem.
Oh my yeah.
I love a bunch of them.
Yeah.
I love
Very
Jinx. I think that
Bob the drag queen, super talent. I think I want a shirt that phrase from Willem. What did he say to your tones seem very pointed right now. I will never forget that. Your tones seem very pointed right now. So there was a lot of talent to that. I mean, the way I see it, not so much for Paul, but some of the people that came on to the show, they were very talented, very creative. I mean, I love Angina, Raja, I mean, you can't deny
don't
that.
get me wrong. That's not,
Yeah.
and you know what? If I was 20 something or 30 something and there was a TV show casting drag queens, I probably would have gone for it too.
You
You
probably
know,
would be
it's
the
just,
winner. Yeah.
it's just, well, I don't know about that, but I mean, it's a sign of the times. It's like just what people do. What is see when I came out, drag was an underground art form. It was not welcome everywhere. You could go to certain clubs, gay clubs, and people would give you dirty looks. You know, I
Mhm.
would go to the Ramrod in Boston. You know, that was a hookup club for gay
Mhm.
leather daddies, and they would give you a dirty look. You know, they didn't want you there.
No, the
You
white leather semi-Nazi club. But go on, yeah.
were, and it
I
just
had to
it,
say that. I mean, if you're white, gay, and nasty, the Ramrod should serve you. Anyways, but that's my opinion. Who
but
cares?
it's just like and fine, all right, fine. We all need our own places. Fine,
Hmm.
great, amazing, but I just didn't really see a reason for me to go on a TV show in
Right.
my
Well,
or in my 40s and now pushing a couple of months down 50. I really if I'm doing a death drop, you need to call an ambulance because that means that I fell and I'm on the ground and I can't get up,
well, you
you
Eileen
know.
Dover, so you better lean, girl.
But this is what they want, and that this
Yeah.
is what they this and you know what? I can't say that when I was capable of those things that I wouldn't have done it. I can't say that
Oh
I
yeah,
wouldn't.
absolutely. I totally agree with you. I think that to your point, if that was good or bad, that drag culture was brought into mainstream. Listen, I'm not sure how to answer that to you. However, it was like that with punk rock. It was that with new romantic. It was that with house music. I mean, let's talk about house music. You know what I mean? Basement, Chicago, then London, then New
Oh,
York in the club, and then mainstream. Like, nowadays they use house music beats for commercials on TV. You know what I mean?
well, house music is a very spiritual thing to me, with the
Super. Yeah.
layers building up. It's like the bass comes in, and then all of a sudden the tempo comes
I
in, and
love
then
it.
the cymbals come in. It's
Mhm.
layer on top of layer on top of layer
Yeah.
on top of layer until
Yeah.
the whole song kicks
Oh,
in,
exactly.
and then
It's
there's
so
the
uh, it's so
build
funny
up.
because if you get in my car, okay, it's like Junior Vasquez, Knuckles, um, all of that house music culture, like what I mean. It didn't change, uh, even though I'm younger than my partner. Technically he's younger than me because if you got in his car, there's like new tunes, new songs, new record. You know what I mean? Play for me, especially with house music, uh, there was a certain energy, like when Junior Vasquez came on for a set. You know what I mean? Yeah, so I think there was. I don't see that anymore. I will say though, there's one DJ nowadays that I love him is Hi-Fi Sean. I think he's British or Irish. I'm not sure, but anyways, Hi-Fi Sean, he's excellent. It's that same beat, it's that same, obviously in a more like modern way. But I
I
think that
like Honey Dijon. I like I like a lot of the DJs. It's just the thing is that like I like me, by the way,
by the way,
Brazil.
hello,
I would love to come and spin for you. Just
there
to
you
let you
go,
know, I
there you
spin from
go,
CDs. I would love to come and perform for you.
there you
I would
go.
love to come and spin for you. So please hit me up at.
Let me translate that. So obviously, sometimes in our life there's not a lot of people, but after there will, 1,000 people to watch it. So let me translate that for you, ok? Pessoal, a
Okay.
gente está aqui com a Eileen Dover. Ela também é DJ, ok? E o pessoal promoter de São Paulo, se você quiser essa tradição total da house music desde a época de Nova York, Club Kid, ok? Esse é o seu DJ e ela está disposta a ir ao Brasil para fazer uma performance, para fazer um gig de DJ. Só que entre em contato, Eileen Dover.
And my email address is ednyc at eileendover.net.
EDC NY de New York. Dover, can you repeat that, please?
E E D N E C is Y-E. Like
You got it.
E D N E C
Y
at
arroba
eileendover.net.
eilendover.net. There you go. I'll go with you if you got a gig there.
Yeah, we'll bring everybody. Let's do it.
Yeah. So, obviously, we spoke about all of the school stuff and, I guess we're being very honest with each other here with, I love it. Um, After the whole Club Kids scene, then there was the movie, right? There, and then you became a DJ. Can you talk about that a little bit?
So I was performing in a lot of the clubs, and I was hosting a lot of the clubs, and as the 90s sort of started coming down, and RuPaul's Drag Race, started popping up, um little by little, like in the early 2000s.
Mhm.
I mean, well, I was in a relationship and you know, from like 2000, I want to say 4 to 2011.
Mhm.
So I was completely out of the loop. But then I started to DJ at Machine in Boston. And then
Mhm.
I started to do acting. I went to acting classes. I went to all those. Thank you so much, Patrick. I went to so many different things. I dipped my toe in so many different waters. Um, and moving to New York was, coming and moving here and making it my permanent residence was something that I just needed to do because, like, I would go back to Boston and I had an agent at this talent agency, and they would call me and
That's
they'd say,
awesome.
like, can you be there in 10 minutes? And I'd be like, oh, I just got off the bus. And it was like, oh, it was so much, like, so it just wasn't working out. So I just had to come here and, and live here
Yeah.
full time. And I did live here full time. I mean, I did live here previously. It's just that I didn't have a permanent address. Like, I lived in the Chelsea Hotel. I lived in,
The
lived in
Chelsea Hotel. Wow.
the Chelsea. I lived in the St. Mark's Hotel. I bounced around. I lived on couches. I lived on my friend's couch on Avenue
You're a
C.
true
Like,
artist. You're a true
yeah,
artist.
like you just like figure it out, like,
Mhm.
And if I had to sleep on a bench and, tie my bag around my waist so that people wouldn't steal it, then so be
Hey.
it. As long as it wasn't freezing cold out.
Which is
But
like that in New York. The first time that I actually had time like I could really enjoy New York. My partner Patrick, he's from Boston too. Um, hey Cross, how are you? So the first time I was to no that
thank you, Cross.
Cross is a sweetheart, yeah. So the first time I was in New York, that I really had time to go and oh my God, it was such a great time. It was like this, okay? My partner Patrick, like typical Boston guy, like pack your cat, but he took me to New York to see Madonna.
Ah,
Okay, at the Square Garden, and for me, a kid from Brazil, that you saw that stuff from TV, you had posters on the wall. It was quite an experience. To go out at night in New York, to the clubs, you know what I mean? And I remember, I think I had a whole bag of CDs that I was like, I want this, I want that, like, that's this edition, that's that, that's this DJ, and that's, and then the Madonna concert, it was fantastic, and I fell in love with New York. I love Boston. I think I love Boston because it was the first place that I arrived in the United States. So I don't know why I love Boston, but I do know why. I mean, I like to party, and they had like monster parties and bars and clubs and all of that stuff. But New York was a really special kind of experience. So that's why I asked. How was it that and am I wrong that you've got a book out?
I don't have a book out. I
Hmm.
have a book in
In
progress.
progress.
And it's
Okay.
been in progress for so long. And the reason why, though, is because I'm cross referencing. I want all my facts to be confirmed. I want all of the things that I put in the book to be true. I want them all to be accurate. I also have to change some names
Ross, yes,
because
we did.
I'm telling my story and a lot of the crazy and wild things that I did.
Mhm.
Just because I'm comfortable having that out there doesn't mean everybody that was with me
Mhm.
is comfortable. So I have to like respect that and make sure to protect those people. So,
I
but
understand you.
anything I say that I did in the book, I did.
Right. And I think that's
Other,
going to be fantastic. You know, I was, and we spoke on the phone about this, and honestly, I'm like so happy because I really wanted to talk to someone like you from New York, that whole club kiss, all of that stuff. Okay, on a more positive way. There's so much positive that we can talk about. You know,
oh, so many great
you
things
know,
happened back then.
so many talented people, and I'm so glad that we're here having this conversation without having to, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right, right,
I think
because
I think everybody knows the subject that we're avoiding, and that's I think it's a good thing. I think it's
right,
like,
because yeah,
that particular incident did cast a
right,
dark shadow, and I think what we're
right,
trying to do
yeah.
is shed some light on some of the amazing
Yeah.
things that
That
happened.
happened. I mean, look at the influence that you guys had around the world. I was, a young kid in Brazil. You know what I mean? And all of a sudden, I want to dress up like you guys. It was like thousands of millions of people. The clubs, raves, and it was all because of you guys. So, I always wanted to have this conversation about that scene without talking about that scene. You see what
Yeah,
I'm trying to say?
the hair in
Yeah.
time, the moment
Right.
in time, like the
Right.
minuscule moment in time.
Yeah.
And when things went really bad, and
Right.
like with regard to the person that those bad things happened to, I can say positively that person was absolutely sweet, kind, had
Right.
ambitions, wanted to do like lots and lots of things outside of the clubs, and I think had some social anxiety, which I did too. So like,
We
a
all
lot
do
of
when
us,
we're young. Yeah.
yeah, we don't know who we are yet, and we're
Yeah.
all suffering fools, like we're all listening to all the fools tell us, oh, this is going to be great and that's going to be great. But, you find your own way. And when you do find your
Mhm.
own way, you find your tribe. And when you find your tribe, there's nothing more
Nothing.
priceless than that.
Oh my God, you said it all. You said it, again, I think I was growing up, I was a little privileged because um obviously, some at times there was some homophobia, and I had to fight. Sometimes I would beat the shit out of someone, sometimes I would get my ass beaten, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I was privileged in the sense that I always had a really great group of friends that, although they were straight, they always protected me. They always, and I remember, when I got like a really serious job. uh, they always had this thing that to protect me, especially in Brazil, right? I guess homophobia. So it's funny that you say that. I just wish that that person had the same protection system that I had to protect him from that. That's so that I think about that. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it could have been me. You know what I'm saying? If I didn't have this system, right, this bubble around me of really good
Well,
friends, it could have been me.
you and I were very lucky in the sense that we had people that, had we disappeared, would come looking. We had
Mhm.
people, and not that Angel didn't. Angel had lots of people who came looking, brothers and stuff
Right,
like that. But we, I think, were not as wrapped up in certain things, and
right.
when you're wrapped up in certain things, it's just hard, like it's just hard to like, to untangle all that stuff. And, like,
Yeah.
and, but, wonderful person, amazing person who made me feel like I fit in a little bit more as somebody who was, coming in from the outside and,
Right.
and I have nothing but,
Yeah.
positive things to say about that person.
Yeah. There's actually a comment here about my comment. I just want to bring it to light. Lucky you, Celso. That's me. For me, it was different. They let people hurt me and say that was the problem. If I change, if I didn't change, they would hurt me. That's such a sad, that's very sad that someone had to go through that. I think that me, you had your mom, my parents. It's undeniable a little bit of a privilege that we had, you know what I mean, to have that house, to have, that set of parents to protect us from this type of thing. But anyways, there's your Cross. Cross is a friend of mine. He's actually just moved to New York. He's loving it. But I always wanted to talk to someone about that era without having to, call the name of that person, which I refuse to, because as a fan, there was, watching from the outside, right? There was so much more. There was that
Oh my
fire,
God. Can you know
energy, the
the create
passion. Yeah,
the creativity of like Richie and
exactly.
Craver with the Heatherette line, the building
Right.
Heatherette and the fashion shows. Oh my God, they were so amazing. And Patricia Field and all of that,
Yeah.
and Amanda, and I mean, there was so many things. Suzanne Barsh was doing party after party. I mean, there was just so much. And, a lot of our community was united. To fight AIDS because
Right.
AIDS was, ravaging a lot of our friends back
Right.
then. And what I loved about back then is you could go up to like the most jaded queen or the most like businessy queen, and you could
Mhm.
say, "We need help for an AIDS benefit."
And there was
Drop it.
that like
That
that,
was
right?
it. They
Yeah.
dropped everything and they were there. It was not, how much am I getting paid? It was not this. It was not that. It was, what do I have to do? When do you need me? And how long, like,
Yeah.
and that was, and it was a time when the lesbians and the gay men came together and the
Yeah.
transgendered people and the gay men and the lesbians came together.
Yeah. Which I find it
And
funny now, this whole movement of taking the T out of the LGBTQ. But I think this is a subject for a second life. I will say this though. I don't consider myself to be much of an activist. Okay. But I once watched an interview, a Boy George interview, where he said that, for being, you don't have to go around screaming, you know what I mean, right? Sometimes, and we spoke about this on the phone, and at times, being yourself is the most political thing you can ever do. Like you being yourself, an artist, and I mean, look at you, you're in New York, and you have your life together, and I'm here in the suburbs of South Carolina, with my partner, and we live in this complex, and uh, you know everybody around us is straight, heterosexual, white, Christian, whatever, and nobody bother us. Actually it's quite the opposite. They're very nice to us. So I think the fact that we are here as a gay couple, right, in itself, what I'm established, is a little bit of an activism. You know what I mean?
I
I,
think so. And it's just like standing out in front of all those Red Sox fans coming out of the thing and
absolutely.
refusing to go inside.
Right.
That
To
was
cave in.
activism.
To cave in. You
That
know what I
was that,
mean?
yeah.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I did Queer Nation, I did
Yeah.
Act Up, I did all of that stuff. I won't mention all the things that I did now because I think we're
Right.
probably gonna need to wrap up soon. But I know that because I don't want your poor viewers to be here for 5 hours. But uh,
My viewers are different. They show up, they say hi, they celebrate, and they go drink and party. And then one day later, I see that, it changes from 100 viewers to 1,000. So I don't know when they watch it, but it's funny. But I get what you're saying.
oh,
Yeah.
thanks, Cross. Don't worry, thank you.
Yeah.
Um, but oh, that's so sweet.
That's
Ten
so sweet.
hours. Well, I have to pee.
Well,
um,
listen, I'll tell you, this is a dream come true. Okay, like I say, this is my first English content, and I really wanted to do with someone special. And I'm so glad you came on board, and I'm so glad you were here, Eileen. Thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time.
anytime.
Appreciate
And
you.
literally anytime. And you know what? We don't always have to like plan it. And like I know we did a lot of planning for this, but if you want to call me up and just say, "Hey, do you want to jump on for," and
I
I
would
can do it
love that.
without I can do it without all of this.
I would
I can
love
do
that.
it, you know, without all of this.
I absolutely believe that we need an episode 2 and 3 of this. No doubt.
Absolutely, and that will happen.
Maybe
And
we'll start. Maybe
thank
we'll
you for
start.
that
Thank
comment,
you.
Cross. And I want to just answer Patrick's question. The book is probably a year out, so it's going to be a little bit of time. The movie, Rufus, it's a horror movie. It will be on Tubi, I believe, for release in December. So
Marvelous.
if you ever had the inkling to want to kill me, that's the movie to watch. And i
I'm
won't
not
i
gonna do
won't say anymore.
that.
but it is a horror movie. And oh, thank you. You're a living legend, my love. And I'm so grateful that everybody tuned in, and I'm looking forward to looking at the comments down the line. And yeah.
Glad. Yeah. So anyway, I just want again, thank you so much for taking the time. Like I say, you've been an idol for a long time, and sometimes when you meet your idols, it's a little bit disappointing. I gotta say, you know, you're amazing, amazing person. Thank you
Oh,
so
thank you.
much. Love you.
I,
Namaste.
I love you too. Namaste, and I'll
Take,
I'll speak to you soon.
take care. Bye.
Bye bye.